Hello, good morning. Okay, so everyone should have a copy of the prompts for the first essay. Just to clear up any confusion, this is not an in-class quiz. These are the prompts for the first essay due in a couple of weeks, okay? Any questions about that? No? Straightforward? Okay. So today we carry on looking at Kripke's naming and necessity and his attack on description theories and what the positive picture is that he's putting in place instead. So just quickly from last time, one line of objection he has is if you say, suppose Gore had been president in 2001, so you're talking about a different situation than the actual one, does Gore there, when you're talking, refer to the same person as it usually does? Yes? Yes. That is the right answer. And does the president in 2001 denote the same person as it usually does? No. So a name is grabbing onto an object and letting you consider what that object does, gets up to in lots of possible situations, whereas a description is specifying a role that different things can meet, different things can perform in different possible situations. So descriptions are quite different to names, right? Is it, some of you seemed somewhat baffled last time. Is it, on reflection, does that now seem plain enough? Yep. So in Kripke's terminology, names are rigid designators, descriptions don't rigidly denote. Yep. Okay, Kripke's got another line of attack on the idea that names are just descriptions, which is there's a whole bunch of names where the only reason we use these names is the person did some famous stuff. Shakespeare wrote those plays. Gödel discovered the incompleteness of arithmetic. The person did famous stuff, and the only description we have for those people, the only description that most people know of these people is they did that stuff. Gödel discovered the incompleteness of arithmetic. So if you ask, how does the name Gödel get hooked up to its reference in the actual world? Someone who believes in a description theory, someone like Searle or even Russell, given that Russell thought that these ordinary names were just disguised descriptions, someone like that is going to say, well, that famous thing, doing that famous thing is what picks out the reference in the actual world, yep, of the name. And Kripke's argument is that even that is wrong. Ordinary names just don't have their references fixed by descriptions. That was going to be right. Gödel would have his reference fixed by something like the person who discovered the incompleteness of arithmetic, yep. And then Kripke tells this story. Did you read the Gödel-Schmidt story? This is such a famous story that we're going to have it once in class anyhow. Whether you understand it perfectly well already or not. It's just a class like this, we must have the Gödel-Schmidt story at some point. I mean, it's traditional. And I should say that all the evidence is that Gödel spent 95% of his waking life doing mathematics. I mean, Kripke can't back up this story at all. But Kripke's suggestion is, suppose that Gödel, as you can see there on the right, a somewhat shifty, shady character, was actually part of a gang. Naturally, in his gang, he would be the brains of the outfit. But let's suppose that someone else was actually the person who proved the incompleteness of arithmetic, right? This unknown, uncelebrated mathematician working alone late at night, sacrificing his health and happiness to the enterprise, proved the incompleteness of arithmetic. But the Gödel gang got wind of this. Here's Kripke. Suppose Gödel was not, in fact, the author of this theorem. A man named Schmidt, whose body was found in Vienna under mysterious circumstances many years ago, actually did the work in question. His friend Gödel somehow got hold of the manuscript, and it was thereafter attributed to Gödel, right? So in this scenario, was Gödel the one who actually proved the incompleteness of arithmetic? Nope, certainly not. But the name Gödel, nonetheless, does refer to the same person. It still refers to the man on the right, yeah? Even though he was not, in fact, the discoverer of the incompleteness of arithmetic. Yes? So with famous deeds, the credit for them can be stolen. And the name refers to the stealer, not to whoever actually did the deed. Yeah? According to Kripke, most people think that Einstein was the inventor of the atomic bomb. Right? But Einstein still refers to Einstein, not to whoever it was that did invent the atomic bomb. Who did invent the atomic bomb? Melissa? Who?
Oh, someone else.
Sorry?
A lot of people did.
A lot of people. I see.
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer, that's right. That's right. Very good. Okay. Well, there you are. Don't say you don't learn anything in this class. Okay, Oppenheimer. Right. So Einstein doesn't refer to Oppenheimer just because Oppenheimer was the one who actually invented the atomic bomb, even if most people think that Einstein invented the atomic bomb. Even if, in fact, that's the only thing that most people think they know about Einstein. Right? Or when people say that Francis Bacon wrote the plays commonly attributed to Shakespeare, yes, I mean, there is Bacon nuts. Yeah, there's some famous actor who's a Bacon nut. Melissa? Oh, well. I'll look it up. These people are crazy. But anyway, they do say that Bacon wrote the plays that are commonly attributed to Shakespeare. These people do not say that Shakespeare is Bacon, right? They say that Shakespeare stole the credit from Bacon. So we accept the possibility that the descriptions we commonly associate with the name may not, in fact, be true of that person. So the reference to the name just isn't being fixed by description. Yep. And with that, we wave goodbye to the description theory of reference. It is a turkey. Is that fair? I mean, my distinguished colleague John Searle, to this day, maintains the description theory of reference. So I should warn you, this is not entirely a dead issue, but maybe it is a dead issue. No one? Okay. There are various ingenious ploys you might make to recover the description theory of reference, but I think it's very hard to see any of them that are plausible as accounts of how the language is actually working. I think it's fair to say that's the mainstream view. Melissa? Is that the mainstream view? Yes. Yes, I think that's the mainstream view. Okay, so what is Kripke's positive picture? How does Kripke think reference actually works? Well, one way to get the feel for how Kripke thinks reference actually works is to consider how photographs actually relate to objects. Yes? And suppose you have a photograph of a particular duck. Is that a duck? Let's call it a duck, right? It looks like a duck. Okay, so you've got a photograph of a particular duck. So that is a photograph of a particular duck, right? Now, I took this picture at the Civic Centre in Marin, and if you go to the Civic Centre in Marin, there are usually literally around 5,000 ducks up there. It is California style feeding the ducks. You bring a ton of bread and you are absolutely engulfed by these things. So suppose that this isn't actually a very good likeness of the duck. And what is it that's actually singling that out as a picture of one particular duck rather than any other? Maybe this isn't a very good likeness of that duck. Maybe there is some one other of the 5,000 that looks much more like this picture. Yeah? Or maybe there is a duck somewhere in South China which actually matches this character, this picture, much better than any duck in Marin. Right? I mean, maybe this is just not a very good picture of a local duck. Maybe the coloration's off. And the coloration would much better match some duck somewhere else. So suppose that's right. Is this a picture of the duck that best matches the picture? Is this a picture of the duck that best matches the picture. So suppose I've got the coloration of the duck off here, right? And there is a duck down in Australia or somewhere, right? Thousands of miles away, that looks exactly like this picture. Would this picture, therefore, be a picture of that duck in Australia? No, I think that is the right answer. So what does make this a picture of this duck? It's a goose. Yeah, the plot thickens. Right. Well, I don't wish to undermine my credibility too completely here, but let's call it a goose. Have it your own way. Where was I? What makes that a picture of this goose? Assuming it to be a goose for the moment, right? What makes it a picture of this one rather than any other? I mean, that is a picture of a particular goose, right? You'll give me that. A particular fowl. Yes? Right. Okay. So how does the connect between the picture and that particular fowl get set up? I mean, how do the photograph connect to the fowl? That's like the question about reference, but it seems like it should be kind of obvious in this case, right? There is nothing hidden from you. Yeah. So what is it? What connects that goose out there living its life in Marin to this picture? Is it that it is the one that best matches the picture? No, it is not the one that best matches the picture. So what is it? What is the connection? Yep. It's the one I took a photograph of. Yeah, but spell that out a bit. What makes it the case that I took a photograph of that duck rather than any other? Yes?
It wouldn't have to follow that when you were there present taking a picture. There was there was X that had to be present in order for you to take the picture.
X had to be present for me to take the picture.
For instance, like the duck or,
Yeah.
I mean, like it has to follow the same object as reflected in the photograph.
Aha.
Then, like the condition of satisfaction must have been fulfilled.
What conditions of satisfaction? What do you mean? That sounds like a description, right?
Yeah.
What description?
So for instance, like the duck that you took a picture of had to be present, like that. Well, it's kind of
These are both very close. So these are both, I think, in the right area. 1 and 2.
Time and location.
Time and location. Yeah. How does that work? I mean, we were there at the same place at the same time? Actually, there were thousands of ducks there at that place at that time.
Well, time, location, and, well, exact location,
Uh-huh.
exact time, exact duck.
Okay, again, there is something right about that. Yeah, yeah.
Is this something like Plato's theory of forms?
Plato's theory of forms. Wow. Okay, things are hotting up. Right? Yeah. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Like there has to be this form to shed light on or cast this image onto what we see in the photograph. So this entity, this stuff that's more real than the image, and it casts this.
Yeah. I don't deny that you could translate this into the theory of forms, but I think you still got the question. I realize I slid back into calling it a duck, but how is the image getting hooked up to that object? Yes?
Maybe the goose caused
The goose, yes, let's call it a goose.
the photograph to come to existence.
The goose caused the photograph to come to existence.
Well, I don't know.
It did. I mean, you're right. It had to be that goose, light bouncing off which entered the lens, right? And hit the, I don't know, what do you have on a camera nowadays? You don't have film anymore, right, Melissa? The sensor at the back of the camera, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's right. The goose was, and that's where all these other answers that seem to me circle. The goose had to be the one that was there, that caused that image to be formed just the way it was. Yeah? So there might have been distortions in the process so that it produced an image that didn't quite look like that particular goose. But yeah, so I think you could have two broad theories of how photos work. You could say What makes it a photo of this particular fowl is that that's the one that best matches the photograph. And that would be like a description theory. That's like the wrong answer. Yeah? But if you say, well, which one is it a photograph of? Well, the one you're taking a photograph of is the one that's causing the light to enter the lens in just that way. Yeah? So that's why talking about geese in Australia or South China or whatever is not to the point, because there's no way they were causally involved in the production of that photograph. Yep. Plain enough? So that's Kripke's idea. I mean, he doesn't put it in terms of photographs, but that's the idea. That you can think of the descriptions that a name is associated with, like the discoverer of the incompleteness of arithmetic or the inventor of the atomic bomb or whatever. You can think of them as like a photograph of that thing. Right? We've got all this information circulating about the object in the community. And that's like a photograph, that's a depiction of the object. But a description theory says what the name refers to is whatever best matches those descriptions. And what Kripke is saying is what the name refers to is whatever caused us to use those descriptions, something like that. That's a way of thinking of it. So he says there are two stages in the way a name works. First of all, there is an initial baptism or dubbing where you say, I shall call this the Golden Gate Bridge, or I shall call this the Mary Celeste. You see what I mean? You give the thing a name, you dub it. And then there's a chain of communication where people start talking about it. Have you heard the latest about the Golden Gate Bridge or the Mary Celeste or whatever it is? Yeah? So people who weren't at the initial dubbing are in this chain of gossip, talk about the thing. So what matters is how that cluster of descriptions that we have, I mean, Searle was right, there is a cluster of descriptions relating to the thing circulating in the community, but what matters is how that cluster of descriptions was generated, not what best matches the cluster of descriptions. So that's just like the photo. Is that all right? Yep. So let's just go over these two stats a bit more slowly. There's an initial baptism in which the thing is named by ostension, or the reference to the name may be fixed by a description. So you say, I'll call Vulcan whatever planet it is up there in the night sky. Yep. Or I'll call this child Barak. Yeah, so that's clear. That's reasonably clear what he means. That often happens. Yes? And then the chain of communication, where the name is passed from speaker to speaker. Through various sorts of talk, the name of, let's say, Feynman, physicist Feynman, is spread from link to link as if by a chain. A certain passage of communication reaching ultimately to the man himself does reach the speaker. The speaker is then referring to Feynman, even though he can't identify him uniquely. So someone dubs this person Feynman. People talk about Feynman. People tell stories about Feynman. By the time it gets to me, I may have a very garbled, incorrect picture of who Feynman is, what Feynman is doing, and so on. I might even get it that he's a physicist. But by the end of that chain, I'm still referring to the physicist, because that's the man at the other end of this chain of communication, not because my descriptions of him are correct. Yeah. So this is very different to a description picture. Yep. Descriptions are implicated because people do describe things, but it's your embedment in the community reaching back to those dubbings that's the important thing. A chain of communication going back to Feynman himself has been established by virtue of his membership in a community which has passed the name on from link to link, not by a ceremony that he makes in private in his study. By Feynman, I shall mean, is the actual chain of communication that's relevant. Yeah? So if you think of the cluster of descriptions circulating in the community as a kind of photograph, the community photograph of Feynman. And what the cluster is of isn't a matter of who best matches the descriptions. If this is our communal photograph, our communal impression of Feynman, it may be pretty wrong. There may be someone else that matches better. But Feynman's the person, how should I say, light bouncing off whom generated that cluster of descriptions. Yeah. Sorry, can you say louder? Yeah. Yes, right. I think I know the game, but this is a new name for it to me. So, telephone, bring me up to speed here. Melissa? No, I'm just kidding.
And then you keep whispering it down the line, and usually by the time it gets to the end, it's garbled and impossible to recognize.
That's the one you mean? Okay, yeah. I can't remember what it wasn't called telephone. Okay, but you're right. So that's right. All you have to add is the person who starts it off takes an infant or a chair or something and says, I dub this Valerie, right? I'll call this chair Valerie. And then you pass on facts about Valerie down the chain. Yeah, and whoever's at the other end of the chain making a remark about Valerie, then it's this thing they're talking about, even if by that time it's turning out that people think that Valerie is a distant star or something. They're still talking about this. Is it that's your example? Yeah. Okay. Have I caught it? No, okay. You said you had 2 points. No? I thought you said, okay, you got both of them. Okay, yeah.
Like, for instance, we refer to a historical figure, like, let's say you're mentioning on there, like, we want to refer to Jesus.
Jesus, okay, yeah.
Historical change from, Joshua to,
The name changes, yeah.
the description that has been used, it still referring to the same identity, like, or at least, like, someone has the mental state refers to the same person, even if the name changes. So
That's true, yeah. That really is true and important.
isn't that
Yeah.
problematic with this here?
Well, I think it depends. I think the possibility of name change is very important. And when you say we've got the same name or a different one, yeah, is an important question. So let's just stay on that for a second. When you say, I don't know, what are the other names of Jesus? I don't know.
There's like
Yeshua, okay.
Yahweh, there's different pronunciations.
Okay, let's just call it J. let's call the early form J. Then whether J is the same name as Jesus, I mean, it seems to me a good question. They're not spelt the same way. They're not sounded the same way. That's right. But nonetheless, you might argue that they are the same name. Yeah. It's just that, like most, just as people go through life, and you're not in later years the happy, optimistic person you were earlier on. Yeah, you're a crushed, resentful, bitter individual. So you don't have that same cheery optimism that you had earlier on. Yeah, but it's still the same person. So the same name. You could think of a name as having a history. It gets a bit bashed about as the years go on. It started out being J and it became Jesus. The same name. Yeah. That would be a way of thinking of names anyway. The other thing, interesting thing you said was what keeps it being the same object is the description. But really, if you think of the name Jesus, that is not the right way to describe it. Because the descriptions associated with that name at different times and places have been so wildly different. Yeah? I mean, someone of great religious significance, a savior, and so on, or someone who is to be despised. If you think of the way that some atheistical regimes would have thought of him, yeah? Someone who's to be despised, someone to be forgotten, a fraud, a charlatan. You see what I mean? Radically different descriptions, but you're hanging on to the same object through it all. Yeah. And there I think the causal continuity, the idea that something like that is what's mattering, is the important thing. It's the same source for all these stories. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you had a question.
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe names change
Yes, right, right. Yeah, you could think of it as a connected process. It's an analogous process. You have to be able to separate out the name and the object, yeah, before you can ask about the causal chain connecting them. But the name might have a history. Yeah, that's the important thing. Yeah?
I guess it's not obvious to me how this account would deal with names that don't seem to fix on a particular reference, like we talked about like the Supreme Court or
The Supreme Court, yeah.
companies like BP. And it seems like they don't fix on particular people, or various people could fill the role of.
Sure, different people fill the role, yeah.
But it seems like their names and not descriptions.
Very good. I strongly agree. I share your feeling. Can't you talk about the Supreme Court causing things? I mean, if I'm politically very engaged, I might find myself thinking, the Supreme Court is the reason everything is going wrong here. Yeah? I could say it's the fault of the Supreme Court. They made this happen. And I don't mean any one particular individual. Yeah? I mean that institution. Yeah? Or if I'm arguing the other case on the other side, you could say the Supreme Court has been the source of many great decisions. Right? It made all that good stuff happen. Yeah? You can argue about that. So I agree that we're thinking of an object here. I agree it's not any one person. But insofar as we're thinking of an object, I think we're thinking of it as something that kind of causes and effects. Yeah? And I agree too that that's a little bit weird because it seems a bit abstract. Yeah, and you think of something that's having causes and effects as like a chair or a person or something. But my sense would be you can do it. Yeah. When people say Monsanto is the source of great evil, yeah, then they're saying this company causes this bad stuff to happen. And when they want somebody to be punished, they're not necessarily going after any particular person. They want to go after the company. You know, you think of it as having a nexus of causes and effects, something you can act on and affect, make it do different stuff. Yep. Okay. Yep.
I have a question related to the Jesus example. I do think it's really common that one object can have different names. So I think.
Yes, very good. Yes, yes,
so
yes.
I'm trying, and that the person Jesus can have different names too.
That's right.
It doesn't undermine this causal theory, I don't think. And then another thing is, I was trying to think how this picture can solve the Hesperus and Phosphorus.
Yes.
It's the same object with two different names because one is stuck when it was in the morning. And
Yes.
one was stuck when it was in the night, right? I don't know which one.
I agree. That's absolutely the right question to be asking. Yeah.
So is that why it's off? Because they were done at different times, and then, it turns out that they're actually the same object. That's why it's off the.
Isn't that intuitive? Yeah. That's what's going on. It's not that you're getting a description in the morning and the description in the evening and the different descriptions.
But it was stuck at different times.
It's the important thing is that they're two different causal chains. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. We'll come back to that. It's a very important idea, that, and it needs a lot of discussion. Yeah. Anything else on that? Plain enough what Kripke's saying? Okay. There are questions about what kind of causal chain he has in mind. He says, not every causal chain reaching from me to a certain man will do for me to make a reference. And that's true, right? I mean, if somebody just bangs me in the back of the head and I say Wittgenstein, then that doesn't mean I'm referring to the person who hit me in the back of the head. You see what I mean? Or I don't know, a friend of mine had a cat who he thought did seriously resemble Wittgenstein. It actually did look like Wittgenstein. It was a very striking resemblance. The same kind of mad intensity. And he called his cat Wittgenstein. So there's a causal source there. It wasn't just an accident that he was calling the cat Wittgenstein, if you see what I mean. But there was a causal connection between that use of the name Wittgenstein and the philosopher. But when he was going around the house shouting, Wittgenstein, he was not calling on the philosopher. You see what I mean? Even though there was a causal chain. So if you hear a name and decide to use it to refer to an unrelated object, like my friend with his cat, then that doesn't mean you're referring back to the source of the name. So what's the right kind of causal connection? Well, here's Kripke. when the name is passed from link to link, when the name's being handed from person to person in the community, the receiver of the name must, I think, intend when he learns it to use it with the same reference as a man from whom he heard it. Yeah, so that was what was missing in the case of my friend and his cat, right? That he didn't intend to use it to refer to the same thing that everybody else was using it to refer to. He meant to use it with a new reference. Is that all right? I didn't go too fast. Should I do that exactly? Maybe next time I'll try and get a picture of the cat. Sorry? Yes, right. But you see what I mean? That's clear enough what's going on in that example. There is a causal link, but it's not the right kind to get reference. And Kripke says the reason is you've got to intend when you learn the name to use it with the same reference as it was being used with before. That's how reference gets passed on from link to link, its intentions. Someone in this class a couple of years ago gave me this example about the story of Spot. It's a really affecting story. So, okay, well, suppose we have a family with a beloved dog. They play with the dog. He's the center of their family life. One day, the family are out. The father comes back home on his own. And what does he find? Spot is dead. This is a catastrophe. So, being of a caring cast of mind, he puts Spot into a shoebox and goes out and as fast as he can gets another dog that looks exactly like Spot. Then when the family come back, they say, "Dear old Spot, so good to see you." So there, everyone, I guess except the father, is intending to use Spot with the same reference that the name always had, right? Now, when Spot first comes in, how should I put it, the new Spot first comes on the scene, when they say Spot, they're really referring to the old dog, right? Is that right? Yeah. I mean, if someone said, "That's not Spot," they'd be right. But over time, suppose that the new Spot is there for another 10 years, lives to a remarkably happy old age, yeah, dies surrounded by an adoring family. Then when they say, "I shall miss dear old Spot so much," are they referring to the original Spot or to the new Spot? I think they're referring to the new Spot, yeah? If one of them's saying, "Spot needs fed," or "Spot is not dead, Spot's only sleeping," they're talking about the new Spot, yeah? Or they're saying, "Let's put Spot in a shoebox." That's a new Spot they're talking about, yeah? So the reference shifted, even though they all intended to keep it the same, right? So there's one puzzle there about what kind of causal chain you need to keep it being the same object. Here's another kind of case. Suppose you go into the graduate philosophy lounge and there are a whole bunch of people sitting around talking about Donald Rumsfeld. And you know Rumsfeld, everybody's seen this, right? There are known knowns, there are things that we know that we know. There are known unknowns, that is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we do not know we don't know. And so you listen to the graduates talking about this, and you say, Rumsfeld, that must be one of these pre-Socratic philosophers, right? That's the kind of thing that that's the kind of thing that the pre-Socratic said, yeah? And people puzzle over what exactly they meant and how this was the foundation of a great tradition and so on. That's what goes on in ancient philosophy, right, Melissa? That's what they all do. They sit around with this stuff that someone said in the 6th century BC or something and try to figure it out. So you go away thinking Rumsfeld. Did Rumsfeld come before Plato? Or he must have been before Plato, right? I think well before Plato. And you're thinking about Rumsfeld. So you think he's a pre-Socratic epistemologist. And you tell people, you show off. You say, but Rumsfeld would have said, yeah. So are you referring to the recent politician when you do that? You've got it so wrong, right? Are you really referring to him and saying he's a pre-Socratic philosopher. It seems like you've got it so wrong that maybe you're not referring to anyone at all. Yeah, you just that's just a load of baloney that you've got that. You're not really referring to anyone. Yeah? Or maybe you are. And what's your hunch? In that case, it's clear what the case is. Are you referring to? Yeah?
It is him that caused the causal link.
He's the cause, that's right.
And it's just like, when you say Einstein invented the atomic bomb.
Uh-huh. You're referring the, yeah? Okay.
Isn't there, what other way out does Kripke have?
Kripke doesn't have another way out, right? Because in this case, when you picked all this up, in this case, there is a causal chain from the politician through the graduate students to you, and everybody at every point in that chain was intending to use it with the same reference as the person before. So it really meets Kripke's conditions for reference. But it does raise the question, how wrong can you be and still be referring to the object? Yeah? Okay. Okay, plain enough? Okay. So let's go back to this thing about informative identities and meaning without reference and see how that works in this picture. So our general, the picture we are building up of what the semantic values are. Semantic value, our old friend semantic value, what it takes for a sentence to be true or false, and how the constituents of the sentence make contributions towards the truth condition of the whole sentence. Yes, that's all right? So what's the semantic value of a name? If you want to give semantic values to the sentences of a language, the way you do it on the picture we have so far is you assign objects to all the names, right? Then to all the predicates, you assign mappings from objects onto truth values. So for each object, you've determined whether that object gets mapped to truth or falsity by the predicate, whether or not the predicate applies to it. I put that a little bit weirdly, but what I mean is perfectly straightforward. If you get a predicate like square, then what you do is for every object, you determine whether is square is true or false of that object. Right? That's what I mean, a mapping from objects to truth values. Yeah? For each object, you determine whether you're mapping that object to truth or falsity. That's what the predicate does. What I mean there is very simple, but as I hear myself, I realize I'm making this sound kind of a complex. Is that reasonably straightforward? Are you managing to penetrate the complexity there and understand what I mean? Yes, I can certainly say that I can do. One simple way to do it would be to specify a set and say, if I've got the predicate red, right, then the semantic value of that is the set of all red things. And what you're doing when you specify that set is you're saying for each object, does red apply to that? Well, red will apply to it if it's in the set. If it's not in the set, it doesn't apply to it. Yeah. So you fix for each object how to map that object onto a truth value. So for any sentence of the form A is red, you now know what it takes for it to be true or false. Namely that the object should be one that this predicate maps onto the value true. Yeah. If you follow me, you will see that that is extremely simple, though I'm not somehow managing to express it very simply. Yeah? Okay? Okay. And quantifiers are the tricky ones. Every, any, some. Yeah? These are mappings from the semantic values of predicates onto truth values. So if you say there is some x, if you say there is at least one x, then what that says is there's at least one object such that that predicate maps that object onto true. So quantifiers are pretty fancy. Yeah. So you get names, tagging objects. Predicates are functions, so that if the predicate's a function, then you pop an object in there and out comes a truth value. Yeah? You see what I mean? And then a quantifier takes a function like that. It takes a function and it maps that function onto a truth value. So the way there is at least one that maps that object onto onto true, just if there's one object that if you put it in there, maps onto true. Yep. Okay, that's semantic values for all the bits and pieces. Okay, so homework is just to think about that a little bit, if that isn't already luminously lucid. Luminously lucid. Okay. Okay, so we're focusing on names. So the two basic problems we had. I mean, it'd be the natural thing to stick with this picture where names tag objects, and that's the whole story. Just stay with that. But we had these two problems of informativeness and meaning without reference. Right? That's familiar at this point. Yep. So how's it going to go for? I mean, Russell took the high road. If ordinary names are really names, then Scottish Sir Walter would be the same trivial proposition as Scottish Scott. Yeah, you couldn't have informative identities with real proper names. So Russell said what we ordinarily call proper names are not strictly speaking names at all. Yes, he thought these are just fakes. These are really descriptions. And I should have said the critical thing here, of course, is that descriptions are quantifier expressions. Yeah, so descriptions belong to a much fancier level of language than names. Descriptions are doing something pretty complicated. They're saying there's a unique F, which is a quantifier, not just tagging an object. So Russell says you've got two classes here. You've got ordinary proper names and you've got real proper names. And with real proper names, you never get informative identities. And if you can make sense of meaning without reference, then what you have is not an ordinary proper name. Now, one way of hearing the whole thrust of what Kripke's doing is to say that he's arguing that ordinary proper names are the real proper names, the logically proper names in Russell's sense. And that thing about rigidity is a way of making it very plausible that the name is just glomming onto an object and keeping tabs on it. There's a very simple connect there between the name and the object. And that stays invariant no matter what possible situation you're thinking of. And these things about the descriptions coming adrift from matching the reference is another way of getting it, that causal connect between the name and the object is the simple tagging. That this simple tagging here is the causal connection. That's what's going on with names. So Kripke's arguing that ordinary proper names are logically proper names. Now Russell's thesis was there's a basic class of names that get tied up to objects, but not by being defined in terms of descriptions. And it's acquaintance that connects them. Now Kripke agrees with this, right? There's a basic class of names that are getting tied up to objects, but not by being defined in terms of descriptions. So you might say, well, where Russell has acquaintance, Kripke has a causal connection. Yeah? Russell had the idea that if it's a sense datum that's right before your mind, then you can refer to it. Kripke's got the idea, no, if there's a causal connection, which might be at some distance and remote, then that's all it takes for reference. But now think about it in terms of photographs. Look at this affecting picture. Dear me, poor little thing. Could that identity be true? Could this person be this person? I mean, the photographs are being taken at different times, of course. I mean, this is the youthful, the more youthful one. Yeah, but they could be the same person, right? That's all right. Would that be informative to be told it was the same person? Yes. So that would be like your thing about the evening star and the morning star, right? There's one causal connection here, another causal connection there. It's informative to be told it's the same thing. But okay, let's do a little trickier one. What about uninformative identities? Is it informative to be told that this one in the left here, the top left, is the same as this one in the top right? Is that informative or not informative? It's not informative. Not informative is pretty strong, right? It's logically true that these are the same. They could be twins. How do you know they're not twins? Yeah? Oh, you were going to say that too. Sorry. right. Sorry? There could be clones, yeah. Or this could be a touch-up of a photo just to, of someone else, yeah? To make it look like that one, right? So that's possible, right? I mean, Frege, uninformative is pretty strong, yeah? It's really a matter of logic alone that the thing is true. But that can't be logic alone, yeah? And similarly, of course, for the bottom one, I mean, is that one, okay, you see the point, right? It's informative to be told that this one is this one. If description was a matter of match, then it wouldn't be a problem. Because the descriptive content of the two pictures is exactly the same, right? So if one of them picks out a unique thing, then the other one will have to pick out the same unique thing, because it's the same descriptive content, yeah? But we're not looking at match anymore. We're looking at causation. And the causation could be different, even though the photos are so similar. Yeah, that's the thing about twins. So if signs have their references fixed by causal chains, then it looks like an identity is always going to be informative. Yeah, the earlier questioner made the point, yeah, you can understand how the evening star and the morning star is informative on the causal picture by saying it's different causal stories. But it could always be a different causal story. It's always informative to be told it's the same causal story. And finally, couldn't it happen that you're using a name without anything at the other end of the causal chain? And you're talking about causal chains that might stretch back centuries. And maybe there isn't anything at the end of them. And if that's what happens, then you don't have any meaning for the name. It's only the causal chain connecting to the object that gives it meaning on Kripke's account. So this picture doesn't seem able to explain how there can be meaning without reference. So this again is Frege's revenge, right? Informativeness and meaning without reference are actually really hard on this picture. And I should say they remain hard to this day. Kripke's picture is the dominant picture of reference to this day. That's why we're doing it. But these problems are still not. There are a number of people theorists who have solutions that they think are perfectly satisfactory. What there is not is a theory that everybody else thinks is satisfactory, other than its proponents, if you see what I mean. And on that bombshell, we'll pack it up for today and we'll finish up on Kripke on the next meeting. Wednesday, right.